We got to talk more about this transgender issue that's going on. The Biden administration is trying to um, say that men can be women and that just by identifying as a woman, they can be in women's locker rooms and see them undress and get fully naked and nude and can undress themselves in front of our female athletes. And if you have sisters, if you have cousins, female cousins, friends, aunts, moms, how about that? Coworkers, how about that? Uh, you can now go join a female team if they're a man. And there's always the problem of, according to the left, there's this mob, and there's a mob that's really bad, and it's true, except from what I can see right now, it's the left. Now, look, do I agree that a lot of the right is has bad mobs? Sure, both parties do, but the left mob is doing things that I've never seen the right mob do, if there is such a thing, right? We can ask that question too. Well, let's go ahead and see what happened to Riley Gaines. We've covered her here on the show, and she spoke out against having a man in her locker room and competing against other women and taking roster spots away from actual real women to give to men who think they're women all of a sudden. So let's go ahead and see what the mob did to her.
Yields. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes for the purposes of asking questions. You know, what's interesting about this entire debate, we dealt with this in South Carolina when I was in the General Assembly. It shocked me, the polling, when you look at this, the amount of people that support keeping girls in girls sports and men in men's sports.
Now look at this, right?
70% around the country. The American people can't agree 70% on anything. But on this, they are there. They understand it.
Well, they agree that we should have health care and that employment health care is bad. They agree that we should have Medicare for all. By the way, that's 72% of Americans. And that's not according to me or any liberal outlet. That's according to Fox News, apparently. They agree that we should have a living wage. That's 60%. More than 70% of Americans think we should have background checks, 97%. But either way, there you go. 70% of Americans think that we should have women in women's sports, men in men's sports, and we should not be changing things. 70% of Americans are in disagreement with the Biden administration.
And it makes common sense. And so, Ms. Gaines, when you travel the country, what are some of the things, the stories that you hear from women who are seeing this in their schools and on their campuses?
Well, first and foremost, to your point, as we see a lot of times, both at the state and federal level, how representatives vote, senators vote, delegates vote, how we see the media portray this issue, it seems as if it falls on party lines. But just as you said, that could not be further from the truth. This extends beyond the political aisle. And that's certainly something I've seen traveling the country, going state to state, talking to women who have been impacted by this in some capacity, whether that be in their sport, whether that be women in prisons who have dealt with male inmates being allowed into their prisons, whether that be, again, the case of the sorority in Wyoming, whatever the situation might be, bathroom instances. As we saw this week, a headline about a male who was allowed to sleep in a bed, be roomed with a woman. And the answer is always the same thing, and that this is harmful specifically to women. It adversely affects women. Again, this whole hearing, we haven't talked about females entering into men's sport because that's not a threat, and it's not happening, and it won't happen because this is only happening one way, and that way is the way that affects women negatively.
Yeah. Imagine that. Now we're having male inmates being put in with women inmates, with female inmates. Now a man is allowed to room with a female dorm student. Really? A female student in a dorm? And that case in Wyoming, a male, not even transgender, a male was allowed to be in a sorority. And we'll have to cover that story. The comment section with Brett Cooper did a great job covering that. And bathrooms, now I can be a man and enter a female bathroom, and that's okay. Yeah, we're negatively impacting women. Yeah, we're negatively hurting women and we're putting them at a dangerous risk. And the Democrats claim to be all about women and pander to women all the time. And the women vote for the Democrats thinking, oh, they're there for me when they're not. They're not. And they never will be. And 70% of the American people agree on this issue that we should keep biology, or at least if you want to be transgender, go ahead. But we should not be allowing men to be in women's sports. Not at all. And 70% of us agree on that. And it's not along party lines, as she pointed out. The media wants you to think that because they want you to be divided. It's the same thing on the fact that they don't want you aligning on issues of high inflation, unable to afford your gas, unable to afford your mortgage, unable to pay the rent, unable to pay the water bill. You're unable to buy a car, save money for a vacation, for your family, for your kids to go to college. Education is too costly. All those issues, low wages, union and labor rights. If you align on those, it doesn't matter your party. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, Muslim American, Buddhist, Hindu. It doesn't matter. Everyone can identify with those issues. It doesn't matter, but they can't have you and another person of another party coming together because it goes against their narrative. And she made a great point here. Let's continue.
Right, and so you look at the polling on this, and then we just talked about this, but it's remarkable to me. I mean, this is the success of Title IX. When you have, roughly 300,000 at the start in 1972 female athletes, and now you're over 3 million. People understand what is going on. Your parents understood what was happening in your locker room. They understand what's going on. That's why they're so supportive of keeping a fair playing field and supporting Title IX in its original intent. What are some of the concerns, and maybe not the specific instances, but maybe some of the themes that you hear from women across the country?
Well, one, as we've mentioned, safety aspects, especially in sports that require physical contact or throwing something at one another or collision. These girls are scared. Another thing I hear across the country is women are terrified to speak out. They're terrified to be vilified. They're terrified to be called transphobic or bigots like we've been called in this hearing today for stating our views. And that's a real threat. And I understand it because since taking the stance that I've taken, my address has been leaked. And since my address was leaked, I've had people showing up at my doorstep. I've had drones flying above my house. I can't even tell you the amount of death threats that I've had that have rendered the FBI getting involved. It's real. The vitriol I've faced, I've been held for ransom for over 4 hours where these protesters demanded that if I wanted to make it home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. I've been hit. I've been spit on. I've had bottles thrown at me, drinks poured on me. Thomas's teammates in particular, they were forced every single week to go to mandatory LGBTQ education meetings to learn about how just by being cisgender, they were oppressing Thomas. And when they were concerned about the locker room aspect, and 16 of these swimmers, Thomas's teammates, sent an email to their administration with their parents on the email expressing their discomfort in the locker room, the administration responded back with, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources that you should seek in an attempt to re-educate yourself. At Roanoke College.
In light of the time, Ms. Gaines, just real quickly.
You're psycho. You're the problem. It's not Will or Leah Thomas's fault that you can't stand seeing a penis right inches from you. It's not our fault that you're uncomfortable with a man seeing your breasts, a man seeing your female genitalia or your backside, or it's not our fault that you can't even undress in front of a man. It's not our fault that we're putting you at risk of being sexually assaulted by a man trying to identify as a woman. That's what they're saying. Not, hey, I understand your concern. It's basically, I hate to put it this way. Well, I'll put it this way. Screw it. Deal with it. It doesn't matter. We don't care. We don't care. And the safety concern is absolutely real. We talk about women needing to be safe in their homes, in their workplace, and we talk about workplace harassment. A lot of these women get paid by sponsors. A lot of these women go into these sports professionally post college, and that's called work. They technically are in a job, and they're getting harassed. And Title IX says sex is a man, sex is a woman, and it does not go further. It does not. And they're now being told that because you're a woman, you are oppressing men. You are oppressing people that want to be women but can't physically be women. That's what they're getting at. And Riley Gaines was held for ransom. Riley Gaines, if we're going to talk about a mob on the right side, if we're going to talk about the Boogaloo Boys, we're going to talk about the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the people that protested, because I think they're protesters or not terrorists, and I apologize for calling them terrorists on January 6th. I called them that on January 7th, and I apologize for that on this channel. And I did it once before, and I'll do it again, because they weren't terrorists. They called them a mob. What about that? What about being held for ransom until you gave them what they wanted? What about sending drones to her house, having people show up at her doorstep, death threats being thrown at her, and her address being leaked? That's what the Democratic Party is allowing, and they don't care. So whenever you see any left person talking about fascism on the right or mob mentality on the right, why don't you ask them about Riley Gaines being held for ransom by the left?
I know that the locker room situation that you described earlier, do you think that the NCAA is actually working to improve this situation, or is it kind of status quo with them and sweeping it under the rug?
It's certainly status quo. President Charlie Baker testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee a few weeks ago. And when confronted with that exact question, what does this policy pertaining to the locker rooms look like right now? He couldn't answer. He didn't know what the policy was. He had to tell Senator Hawley, well, let me get back to you in writing. And I think that's incredibly telling for the NCAA president to not even know the policy as it stands pertaining to locker rooms.
So he didn't know the policy? Bullshit. He didn't know the policy. He knew the policy. And the policy was absolutely simple. Men in men's sports, women in female sports, period. No ands, ifs, or buts. No ands, ifs, or buts. Period. Plain and simple. Men in men's sports, females in female sports. That's it. And the reason he couldn't get it to you in writing is because he didn't want to be defunded by the Biden administration. That's it. That's why.
Ms. Perry, you described that the federal government is perpetuating an athletic fraud of unprecedented proportions on students. Do you think, one, that the Biden administration's efforts will actually leave a lasting impact on women's sports? And a follow-up with that, do you hope to see a different approach in a different administration?
I think the best and different approach would be to leave Title IX alone as it was originally intended to be interpreted. There was no ambiguity whatsoever in the definition of sex. And ultimately, what keeps us here is our failure to identify biological distinctions between one sex and another. We can use terms like cis or trans all we want, but men and women are different. And the American public knows it, which is why 70% of the American populace wants sports separated by sex. Washington Post, Harvard Harris, Rasmussen reports, all of them across the line, no matter their ideological bent, all indicate that Americans want sex-separated sports. I do have a very strong feeling that this law will automatically be challenged in a federal court. We know that the notice of interpretive guidance has already been seized. It is already now based on 20 states. It is in a holding pattern based on the ultimate release of this final rule. It's a violation of administrative law, civil rights law, and constitutional law. And the ways to challenge it are too long, I think, for the time frame of this hearing today.
Okay, I couldn't make that any simpler. It's unconstitutional. It is illegal. It is immoral. We need to leave Title IX the hell alone. And we shouldn't be changing a law that was passed in 1972. Okay? 1972, that thing was passed 51 years ago. We should leave it alone. Men are men, women are women. We do different things. We all have different skills, but we are different, and we're different for a reason. It's why our world works the way it works. I wish the feminists understood that, but they're part of this problem. Okay? And the feminists will be the ones coming out and say, oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable with a male undressing in front of me. Well, that's exactly what the party you voted for did and is implementing right now. We need to leave Title IX alone because it is unconstitutional what the Biden administration is doing, putting women in harm's way.